So just to touch on a handful of different sizes of fan boats, I know if you're serious about this, that you've been on Google, you've been on Facebook, you've been on bowfishingcountry.com, you've been on Bowfishing Zone, and you've been looking at everybody else's fan boat. Well, pictures are one thing and performance is yet another. So I'm sure you guys have seen these little fan boats, right? Okay, these are typically flounder rigs. Or if we bring them up into the Midwest or inland, then yeah, they're still a fan boat, but they're entry level, not a whole lot of performance, but a lot of noise type of fan, okay? And the reason I say this is because this style of fan boat actually uses a rudder behind the fan in most situations. Some flounder rigs are different, but it's generally for open water, okay? In an open bay where you want to go all night long and you don't want to use batteries, generally open water, you're not worried about hitting debris. These even work on big boats, okay? They replace the electric aspect of the trolling motor with a gas motor. Now, first and foremost, this will be the loudest fan out of everything we're talking about today, okay? The smaller the diameter of fan and the faster the tip speed, those don't go together, but the louder it's going to be, okay? Generally, when you do a direct drive fan, the tip of that fan is going so fast it could even be breaking a sound barrier and is extremely ear-piercing, but it's economical. You know, all you've got is your prop and your motor. You're not spending a whole lot of money on a shroud, on other things. You're just doing it with a, you know, a rudder back here. And it's very easy to steer because you're just taking your stick with a simple boat cable, putting a rudder on it, and you're just steering that rudder back and forth in front of the fan. Economical, easy to build, replaces the trolling motor. But you've got all this rigging, okay? You've got all this extra weight on the boat. It's not just all, you know, cherries when it comes to building a fan. You're going to have to sacrifice a lot. And I'm not just talking about money, okay? So these fans are good for open water, okay? They're good for trolling flats. Once again, most guys build a type of fan like this for a flounder rig. What about the typical fan boat that you will see inland, here in the Midwest, in the South, in the plains? I mean, everybody's going to build, most everybody's going to build a fan like this, okay? And when you talk about a flounder rig fan boat, you're talking about something 6 to 15 horsepower generally, okay? When you talk about a larger style fan that we typically use here in the Midwest, you're going to talk about anything from 13, 15 horsepower is getting pretty small. Let's call this from a 20 horsepower and up, okay? Generally going to be between 20 and 30 horsepower, this style of fan. And the diameters are going to make a big difference, you know, as far as performance goes. Now, if you build this right and it has quite a bit of push for the horsepower that you're putting into it, this boat will typically be able to go over vegetation that's standing out of the water, okay? Cattails, hydrilla, moss, anything like that. It's you know, it's not going to stop it. It's not going to slow you down. It may take a little bit more throttle, but it's not going to stop the boat. Even logs or wood that's, you know, floating in the water that has a little bit of buoyancy to it, you can line that boat up, squeeze that throttle, and push the boat right over top of it, okay? This is generally what most people shoot for when they're building a bowfishing boat. Your horsepower ranges are going to be as big as your pocket is deep, okay? You can buy a 22 horsepower Harbor Freight motor for $700, or you can buy a fuel injected 37 horsepower Kohler for, you know, $3,000. It all depends on how much you're willing to spend, how much performance you want to part with, okay? If you just want to get into it, you just want to get started, go ahead and buy that Harbor Freight motor. If you want the baddest thing that to ever hit the water, then you probably best be buying that bigger motor and even looking for some performance upgrades down the road, okay? So the sizes, before we get in down here to the bottom, let's talk about sizes of props, okay? A small horsepower motor like this is going to be 32 to 38 inch prop diameter, okay? When you get into a 20 horsepower, that's going to put you right at 42 inches. That's pretty much going to be, you know, 42, 44, 48 inch direct drive prop, which means that you have no belt drive, okay? It's just the engine and the prop, all right? Now, one rule to write down here is you do not want to go direct drive anything over 48 inches, and we'll get into that here in just a second. But so in a build like this, you know, with a fan stand, okay, and a fan that will pivot all the way around 360 degrees, okay, you're looking at diameters anywhere from 42 inches up to 56 inches. That's going to be a pretty big one. Now, I have seen bigger than that, but that's pretty much going to be about, you know, the top of what you're going to build. Now, why is that important? Well, the bigger the diameter, the stronger this fan stand has to be, okay? The stronger your crank on your motor has to be. Not only the beating and banging around while you're fishing, but you also got to think about waves, potholes, road drag, all the beating, vibration, and everything that it's going to take strength-wise to stay together for years to come. When you get into your large diameter fans, keep in mind, the bigger the diameter fan, the more performance you're going to see. But once you get into those larger diameters, the harder it is to keep them together because of the stress that they take on the road, on the water, and, you know, through the bush. Honestly, all the things that we throw at these things. So let's get down to this bottom one. This is what's referred to as a globe style fan, meaning the fan no longer pivots on one post, okay? Now it has a post on the bottom and on the top, and it rotates in the middle. Guys will build these globe style fans to counteract the stress that we talked about on the road and on the water. Now, a globe style fan will be anywhere from 56 to generally 65 inches. And 65 inches you're getting above and into airboat props when you build something like this, or, you know, even an ultralight prop. A fan this size is going to take the most horsepower that you can afford and the most horsepower that you can pack into a V-twin motor. You get to thinking about something like this, well, you're going to be spending north of $7,000 on this, okay? Probably quite a bit north of it, and honestly, you're really wanting an airboat at this time. So now you got to step back and think: Am I, you know, do I want to build the baddest fan boat ever created? Well, if that's your thought, then turn the video off because you want an airboat. That's all there is to it. Okay. If you are kind of stuck in the middle here, and this makes sense because of the integrity of the fan and the protection that a globe provides from debris, trees, other vegetation, then, you know, plan on, you know, spending a little bit of money to get here. But both of these are, you know, easily attainable when it comes into the bow fishing world. So Up until now, we've only talked about these two and being direct drive. Now, what's the difference in direct drive versus a belt drive reduction? Well, let's wipe some of this off and I'll explain a little bit of it to you. So what's the difference between going with a direct drive setup versus a reduction setup? Well, first and foremost, price, noise, an acceleration window, okay? All are going to be completely different. As far as performance goes, you can get a lot of performance out of direct drive. You can get a lot more user-friendly fan setup out of a reduction. I hope that makes sense. So with a direct drive system, you're going to be turning the prop to engine 1-to-1. For every revolution the engine turns, that prop's going to turn 1 turn. The problem being is your window, okay? These engines will turn, have a window from 1,000 to 3,500 RPM. So you've got a big prop, let's say a 48-inch prop. That's what I would recommend anybody, not build any bigger than that on a direct drive. But it's turning 1,000 RPM. It's going to be pushing pretty hard, to the point to where it's pushing it faster than what you actually want to fish. So, you've got that aspect of it. You also have the noise level. So this direct drive, these props can only be turned up to 3,000 RPM. So you're going to tune this engine so it runs as close to 3,000 RPM without going over. And you do that by adjusting the pitch blocks in your carbon prop, okay? And in my experience, a 42 to a 48-inch prop, when you change 1 degree, it's going to either add or subtract 300 RPM for every degree that you run, okay? So if you've got a engine and prop setup and it's running 2,500 RPM, that first assembly, well, you take 1 degree out of it, now you're going to run about 2,800 RPM, and that's going to give you just a little bit bigger acceleration window. But the problem being is you're still running 1,000 RPM at idle. Well, the only way to remedy that is to put a belt drive reduction on your setup. 1.65 revolution of an engine will equal 1 turn of the prop. All right? Why is that important? Well, now I can run my engine, at that 1,000 RPM, but my prop's not turning 1,000 RPM. Now my prop's only turning, I don't know, let's say 600 RPM, okay? I haven't done the numbers, I have no idea. But the point is, it's a lot less, all right? So now you can fish much slower. Since you have a little bit increased of horsepower gain because of the reduction, you can put a much bigger prop on. It's kind of a snowball effect. The problem with a reduction is reductions start about 800 bucks and they go up from there. But you can also add a bigger prop. So when you add a reduction, 800 bucks, and then you were going to buy this small prop, but now you can put a bigger prop on, well, there's another 800 bucks. So anytime you add a reduction, you're looking at spending about 1,500 bucks, for that step up. But it increases your acceleration window. So now, I'm idling at 1,000. My fan's only turning at whatever we said, 600 RPM. But now I can take my engine all the way to 3,500 RPM with a fistful of throttle, and given the reduction, my prop will never exceed 2,800 RPM. So now we went from 800 to 2,800, or 600 to 2,800. We increased our acceleration bubble, okay? We went from having a small window from 1,000 RPM to 2,800 RPM to now we got a reduction on here, and we still got that 1,000 idle speed, but our prop is running a little lower. and then we can take it all the way up to 3,500 on our RPM, and our prop will still stay down here at 2,800 RPM within the manufacturer's recommendations for, you know, how quick and how fast we're able to turn this prop. Have I lost you yet? It gets a little bit more complicated, so stick with me. Reductions are great. However, there's not a lot of performance levels in mid-range horsepower fans. From 20 to 25 horsepower in that 42 to 52 inch window on prop size, you're not gaining a hell of a lot of performance as far as what will it run down, what will the boat go over, but you're gaining so much more usability. Okay, it's going to be quieter. The boat's going to fish slower, and you know, honestly, it's going to vibrate less because now you don't have the prop mounted to the engine. It's got that belt in between it, reduces vibration. That's another good aspect that we really should talk about. Why do I recommend that nobody exceed 48 inches on a direct drive prop or a direct drive engine? Well, the reason for that is, have you ever seen metal stress crack? Well, if it stress cracks on that crankshaft, guess what? That prop's coming off of there, that crankshaft's going to give way, and now you've got to buy a new engine and you've got to buy a new prop because when it came off there, it was destroyed. You see, after time, this will destroy your motor, okay? Some of them will last a couple of years, some of them will last upwards of 10 years. However, you put this belt drive reduction on there and it's going to greatly increase the amount of time that it's going to take to tear up the setup, all right? Mosquito. The reason for that is it takes all of the stress off of that shaft. Now, if you buy an engine and you're going to, you know that you're going to buy an engine and make a direct drive shaft or a direct drive fan. The number one thing that you're going to want to look for when you buy this engine is you want a shaft that is 1 inch and 7/16. Okay, that's the big one. That's quite a bit bigger than normal. Okay, you buy a cheaper motor, it's only going to be 1 inch and 1/8. So now that we've confused the living hell out of all of you, let's talk about props and prop performance. So obviously, the bigger the fan is, the harder it's going to push. Now, why is that? Why can't I just grab a whole bunch of throttle and spin it up faster every time and I'll get a little bit more out of it? Well, because of this number right here. We can't exceed 3,000 RPM because the prop will come apart. We don't want to spin it, you know, any higher than that anyway because our ears are going to bleed. So the larger diameter, the better it's going to perform. All right. Rule number one. Rule number two is the more blades you have, the quieter it's going to be. Now, why is that? Okay. The reason being is the more blades you have, the more horsepower it requires. Well, so if you buy a 5-blade 48 inch versus a 3-blade 52 inch, which one's going to push harder with the same engine? Well, the 52 might push a little harder, but the 48 is going to be a little bit quieter because of the tip speed. Okay, tip speed first and foremost for noise level, but the more fan that you have, the more blades you have, the quieter it's going to be as well. It decreases the vibration of the fan. Okay. But once again, the more prop you have, whether it's diameter, whether it's pitch, or whether it's the number of blades, the more prop you have, the more horsepower it's going to require. So you're getting ready to build your project. How should you go about doing it? Well, first and foremost, you got to go back to the front of the video and decide how much horsepower that you're going to need, okay? I recommend that you buy as big a horsepower as you can afford. There's no such thing as having too much horsepower. I don't care where you're putting it in on a boat. Buy the engine first. When we buy an engine, we're going to look for two things. An 1 7/16" shaft that's 4 inches long. That way we can mount our reduction when we buy it. Once we get our engine, we're going to buy our reduction, okay? You can actually buy this in an 1 9/16" shaft too, but this is a minimum requirement. After we buy our reduction, okay, whether you go with a 1.65 or a 2-inch, you want to go ahead and buy that reduction. Now, after you buy these two things, then it's time to call around, okay? Call Ultra Prop Competition, call Aero Prop, call Whirlwind, call Evo, call whoever you want to, okay? Just don't call Multi-Wing or Haskin, those suck. But call a prop manufacturer, all right? Tell them, this is the engine that I've got, this is a reduction that I've got, what are my options? And he's going to give you a couple different options based on thrust calculators, based on the amount that this engine, you know, can accelerate. He's going to give you a couple different options. And you can tell him, well, I want to keep this as cheap as possible, so I'm going to go with a 3-wing prop. Or I want the engine and everything to be as quiet as possible, so give me as much diameter as I can have with a 5-wing prop, okay? These are decisions you're going to have to make, but you want to buy the engine first, buy the prop, or buy the reduction, and then call your prop manufacturers, decide which brand you want, decide how much money you can afford to spend, because honestly, when you go to buy a prop, you can spend anywhere from $350 all the way up to $3,000 on this prop, okay? So it's time to get into the fabrication aspect on how you're going to build this fan. Now, this is probably the most common way to steer a fan, and we call it a turnstile, okay? A lot of guys started doing this with just simple garage door parts, a 3/16 cable, okay, 1/4 inch cable, maybe at the most. Generally a 3/16 cable is enough, but all you do on the shaft of your fan, okay, now you're going to need to do bearings on this shaft when you build it, all right, but at the bottom of the shaft you mount a drum, and with that drum you're going to wrap 3 or 4 wraps with your cable, and then somewhere on there you need to clamp that cable so it doesn't slip, all right? Once your cable comes out of your drum, it'll go to the side of the boat or down the rigging or however you want to get to the side of the boat, okay? So you can run along the gunnel to the front of the boat. At the front of the boat, we're going to do the same exact thing with the same exact drum size on our turnstile. And all this turnstile is, you can get it as extravagant as you want. Some guys use a grip style bicycle, like a breaker clutch bicycle grip for your throttle. Some guys use a pedal, so you're standing on the throttle, you know, with one foot, kind of against that. I don't like that a lot. Or you can do a lever on top of it that is your throttle, all right? Lots of different ways to do your throttle, but basically all this is some pipe, okay? Come up, do a 90. You're going to want to do, you know, anywhere from 16 inches to 24 inches at the most. But just keep in mind, this thing's going to turn all the way around 360 degrees. Depending on how wide your boat is, that may get in the way, pretty bad. So as short as possible, but as long as necessary. And what I mean by that is these fans can be hard to turn, all right? You want that length in that handle to be able to turn it easily. So build it long and then cut it down to what you need versus the other way around. The reason this is, so pronounced and so common to see in the bow fishing world is wherever you point this lever is the direction that you're blowing wind. All right, you want to turn around and put it in full brakes or full reverse, turn that grip around to where that turnstile is facing straight out in front of you and squeeze the throttle. Now all of a sudden that wind is blowing at your back, blowing towards the front of the boat, and you're going to back out of the hole. That's why everybody likes this design. There's a couple more designs, so let's look at them as well. So in this style of fan turning is a push-pull cable, okay? And we have a simple boat style push-pull cable, probably going to be an 8-inch throw push-pull cable, and then we have a simple lever, okay, with a bearing right here in the middle. So you push forward and it pushes the cable out, okay? You pull back and it pulls the cable in. But how does it turn? Well, what you do on the bottom of your fan shaft, you're going to mount a small chain drive, all right? And then right beside it, you will mount a bigger chain drive. Here comes your ratio again. This ratio has to be 4:1. Meaning that the number of teeth on this has to be 1/4 the number of teeth on this. The last time I built one of these, I went with a 21 tooth sprocket and an 86 tooth sprocket. Okay, that's just a little bit bigger than 4:1. The reason for this is our engine, okay, and this is our push-pull cable. All we're going to do on our push-pull cable, okay, here's where it's going to mount right in the center, and then we're going to mount our push-pull cable right here and mount the cable itself. So when I push this, I will have about from here to here, this much motion. And 1/4 turn of the big wheel will mean a full turn on the small wheel, and that will give me my full 360 degrees rotation with a push-pull stick, okay? I like this style better, okay? I don't like cables, I don't like, things in the way. I like this style better. However, you need to be part fighter pilot to be able to understand how to drive this. There is no knowing where the fan is, okay? You push forward, and the system that I had, when I pushed forward, the fan rotated to the left, and that meant that the front of the boat was going to the right. When I pulled back, the fan rotated to the other side. That meant that the front of the boat was going that way. You have to squeeze the throttle, counter rotate, squeeze the throttle, okay? It's a back and forth style of motion, all right? If you understand this well and you have good hand-eye coordination, maybe this style is good for you. The reason I went with this style on my last build is because of the stick steer. I have, basically this much motion in my stick steer. I don't have a big turnstile that's swinging around and knocking 2 or 3 people off the boat while I'm trying to fish, okay? But the problem being with this style is I was the only one who knew how to drive it. And if you don't spend at least a couple of hours, a couple of days, figuring out how to drive this thing, then it's going to be complete frustration. And for everybody who came onto my boat, they couldn't just get up there and drive it because they were either running into stuff, not going where they wanted to, or their trying to fish over here and they're driving it like this, trying to figure out which way is it pointing. So know this going in, okay? You're probably going to be the only guy who's going to know how to drive your boat if you build a push-pull cable. But I liked it myself. Another good thing, oh, and by the way, on our chain drive here, I just go a 40 weight chain. You don't have to go bigger than that. You can go to a 50 if you want to, but 40 is going to be big enough. How I mount this, okay? Let's get rid of this. On my big pulley, all right? I have my little pulley for my engine, all right? Here it is coming down, and my big pulley, I just did a stubby shaft through it, and they make a pillow block that is, let me just draw it real quick. Okay, it's slotted over here and it has a pin here. Here's your pillow block, so here's your shaft. My shaft will go up through the bearing assembly. It's bolted on this end and this end is slotted, okay? That gives me just a couple of inches of play to be able to keep my chain tight, all right? And that's all I needed to do. So it's best to have two of these, one above and one below. With the same bolt running through them, you can just slide it over, tap with a hammer, tighten it down. Your chain is always going to be tight. It's always going to be easy to access and easy to take on and off, honestly, if you need to. But I do like this style. Now, the great thing about this style and this, this way to mount your fan is you can upgrade it, okay? You've heard of guys using actuators on their fans. So let me bring my big sprocket back and my little sprocket back. All right, here's gonna be my chain. Here's gonna be my chain. Here's the engine shaft. Here's the shaft to mount this pulley. And here will be my, my pin that's gonna mount my push-pull cable. And on the same pin, or I can go over here a little bit, just down or whatever, but I can drill another hole through my big sprocket and then I can mount an actuator, okay? By doing this, what's an actuator look like? It's got a little round thing on the side of it, right? Okay, and then on the end of it, have a pin to go through it. So you're gonna mount it here to something solid. The other end is going to be here. Now, when we build our stick, okay, here's the handle for my stick controls. And it go down like that. So I tell you what, let's go with a squeeze throttle. So I'll go with my throttle going up here for a squeeze throttle. But then I'm running a really big fan. It's really heavy. And this push-pull, it just wears my shoulder out and hurts me to no end. So what I can do, I can get a trim switch that is push button up, push button down, wire it to my, whatever that thing's called. And I can put it right here where my thumb would be. Okay. The outboard trim ones have got two buttons on them. We'll just put two buttons right here. So I can wire my actuator in, push it forward, turn, push it the other way, and it'll turn the other way. This way will save you a lot of fatigue if you have a large fan. If you have a big globe, okay, you can do this. If you have a big globe and you don't want to do it this way, you can even do a turnstile with push buttons if you want to. Be a little different, because you're going to have a lot bigger drum and someplace to mount it. Well, what would happen if my actuator would go out? Well, simple enough. All you do is take this bolt out. You can either swing it out of the way, or you can take this bolt out, totally remove it. Now you're back to manual controls on your push-pull cable. May wear yourself out, but you're not done. You can A, get back to the boat ramp, B, continue to fish, and until you get the parts, get the time to get back and fix it. Actuators last a long time and they're able to move a heavy load. I hope some of these styles have helped you and give you just a little bit of thought on how you're going to build your fan. Well guys, in closing, I would just like to, take the time to apologize for my drawing skills. My lighting sucks, my audio is terrible, but hey, I saw this discussion online and just had to jump into it and give you some insight on what it takes to build a fan boat. Now, I know I'm gonna get this, I see this all the time. Why would I ever build a fan boat when I can build a kicker rig and it'll go anywhere a fan boat will go? I'll show you my prop when I'm done, you show me yours when you're done, and well, I don't have to buy a new one, okay? Mine can turn around and go right back through that hole one more time, and you're back there picking up the pieces of your prop. Worried about if your outboard's peeing, and well, honestly, just ain't gonna last as long. Shots fired, I don't care, rate me if you want to, but a fan boat ain't no kicker rig, all right? Fan boat's gonna go as far as the money you spend on horsepower, as far as your ability to drive it, and as far as your attitude is to which direction you want to go and how you're going to go about getting there. That's the only thing stopping it. Unless you hit a piece of steel or a rock that don't move, chances are a fan boat that's built properly is going to go right over top of it. Now, if you're not wanting to spend $5,000 to $8,000 on a high to mid-range horsepower fan boat, then take your hull that you have now, take that $5,000, sell that boat, put that $5,000 with it, and then turn around and find yourself an airboat, because that's what you wanted to begin with. If you're thinking about building a kicker rig, build a kicker rig. If you think $5,000 to $7,000 is too much to spend on a fan, buy yourself an airboat. Fan boats are awesome. You got the best of both worlds. It takes a lot to build one. It takes a lot to keep one together. If you're not willing to make those sacrifices, if you're not willing to take on a project that is going to test your fabrication skills, then stick with your troller boat. Fan boats are awesome. Fan boats are fun. Fan boats have their place in the world. They're just not easy, and they're not meant for everyone. Go forward with this project knowing that you're going to better yourself as an outdoorsman, and you're going to get closer to critters. And when you pull up in a gas station and somebody says, "What's that?" Hey, I built that. That's what it's all about. Killing more shit, saying, "Yeah, I built that." If you get it, you get it. If you don't, well, I probably won't see you as a subscriber next week.